Hello, welcome back to another video here. Today we're going to talk about something kind of near and dear to my heart, due to the fact that I am a full accepted, I gladly accept this, fully pronounced power gamer, min-maxer, if you will. Anytime, one of my favorite things I love to do is anytime I see a video come out that talks about, the most broken spells, the most powerful abilities, like that's the kind of shit that I just immediately am drawn to. It's the stuff that I want to, theory craft and come up with, even better alternatives, or just, accept the fact that, holy shit, that's a combination I've never thought of before, and then going with that. And so I decided to come up with my own little list here of what I consider to be the 5 most, I believe it's 4 or 5, most broken spells in D&D 5th edition. Alright, so without any, further ado, let's get right on into it here. So my tier list, nothing too crazy here. I don't have A, B, C's, D's, F's, S's. Alright, I simply have kinda broken, really broken, and hella broken. Now, of course, before I get into the next slide here, this begs the question, right, which is, what constitutes broken? And I think that we all kind of have our own little opinions on it, but for me, personally, what I believe broken is in 5th edition, especially when we're talking about spells or abilities, to me, broken is the implication that if you take this spell, then the DM has to change. They have to. They have to change how they were going to create or build the encounter. They have to account for you. When you, by you taking a spell, you change how a DM has to play the game. To me, that is when we go from just a really good spell to a broken spell. So, with that kind of, acknowledge, let's get in here to kind of broken, which means broken, but, not the worst offender, but definitely pretty bad, and that is Tasha's Mind Whip. Now, I will say that this spell, the fact that it is a 2nd level spell, I think kind of thins it out a little bit, which is why I'm willing to say that I don't necessarily think that this is the most broken of all spells, but it is still broken. So, what is Tasha's Mind Whip? All right, well, it is a spell, 2nd level, in which you psychically lash out at one creature you can see within range. I believe it is a range of I want to say 60 feet. I don't think 30 feet. I think it's 60 feet. The target must make an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 3d6 psychic damage. Not the greatest of damage, but it's the second effect that is much, much crazier. And it cannot take a reaction at the end of its turn. Moreover, on its turn, it must choose whether it gets a move, an action, a bonus action, or its movement. It can only choose one of these 3. Now, on a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and suffers none of the spell's other effects. That is fucking broken. This is nuts. This is a fantastic spell. The damage is maybe pathetic, but imagine if you can get this off on an enemy that is a melee-based enemy, and you can get it when it's 30 feet off, 40 feet off. If it fails its saving throw, which, intelligence is not usually a very high saving throw. Most monstrosities, most enemies are probably not pulling up with a great intelligence saving throw, which is another reason why this spell is so powerful. It's because it used a saving throw that I feel like a lot of creatures just don't have proficiency bonus in. And the fact that they then have to choose between either moving, action, bonus action, and cannot take a reaction. This is so crazy. This is nuts. This is basically the best part of handing out a slow spell, right? And forcing the enemy to have to choose between options. You just get. And it's an intelligence saving throw. I forget what slow is. I want to say slow is wisdom. the fact that this uses a rarer good, trying to think of the best word, this targets a saving throw that is usually not as good as slow. The fact that you can do this over and over and over again because it's a second level spell, that's not crazy. Like, you will probably have, if you're a wizard, which I think can take the spell, if you're a sorcerer, which I think you can take the spell, Warlock, maybe Warlock, kind of questionable, but, if you're a Warlock or a sorcerer, you have the ability to get spell slots back. Like, why wouldn't you use this as your second level spell? What are you going to use instead? Scorching Ray? Probably not. Misty Step? Okay. But this is probably going to become your go-to second level offensive spell, and why wouldn't it? It gives you so many benefits, and it can easily cause the biggest of enemies. Like, I can just imagine, like, if this, if a level 10 wizard went up against Baphomet, CR 24 Baphomet, and they just every turn just use Mind Whip. I as the DM, I would have to use legendary actions or legendary resistances. I'd have to. I'd have to give enemies range. I'd have to. Because I know exactly how this spell is going to get used. You're going to use it when my enemies are trying to close the distance, thereby making it so that if they want to close the distance, they can't do anything else. Absolutely broken spell. Not the most broken, but broken. Alright, so speaking of broken, alright, moving on up here to a full-on just shattered. We have Silvery Barbs. Now, this spell comes out of Strixhaven, so depending on who your DM is, they may or may not allow this spell. It is technically official D&D book, so I don't know why they wouldn't, but if maybe you did not purchase Strixhaven, or if your DM did not purchase Strixhaven, it is possible that, you do not know this spell. It is a first level spell. It uses your reaction, and what it does is you magically distract the triggering creature, right? So your creature, an enemy does something, and you use your reaction to use this ability, and you cause that creature to undergo a moment of uncertainty. The triggering creature must re-roll whatever the d20 is and use the lower roll. So basically, you are forcing disadvantage. But do you notice that it doesn't say on what? This could be used on a saving throw. This could be used on an attack. This could be used on a grapple check. This can be used on a counter spell. It can be used on anything. And, to top it off, it's not done yet. You can then choose a different creature you can see, yourself included, and you can grant advantage on your next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw that you make in the next minute. So not only are you causing an enemy disadvantage, but you're giving yourself advantage in the same time with a first level spell slot as a reaction. This changes. Imagine if you had two enemies. Imagine if two of your party could just trade this ability, could just fire back and forth, basically ensuring that every single attack that my enemies do or saving throws that they make are always at disadvantage. I'd have to give my enemies magic resistance. I'd have to give them a monstrous AC. I'd have to change how they acted and how they were drawn up, because I would have to go into combat encounters assuming that there's going to be times where my enemies are just going to be at disadvantage for fucking everything. That's a huge change. That's such a huge difference. All right, this is a fantastic spell. In my opinion, broken. All right, really broken. We don't have to sit here and go through all of this. We know this spell. It's been here since the very beginning, and that is, of course, Polymorph. Okay? Polymorph is just broken. The fact that it allows you to polymorph into a creature, so that, you can, go off and chase after the druid when they go into their wild shape, and you can be right there beside them. Depending on whether or not you play Matt Mercer's rules, which is, if you polymorph into a beast and that beast happens to have a very low IQ, your DM might be like, yep, you are distracted by a light bulb next to you, or, a laser pointer off in the other room. Like, you're, sorry, but, you forget why you turned into this creature. Now you're just living as that creature. Like, if you're playing with a DM like that, then maybe that side of this spell loses some of its interest. But what's amazing about this spell is that you point at a creature. It has a range of like fucking 60 feet, 90 feet. It's 4th level, which means it is relatively high, but it's not so insanely high that, you only get to cast it once, right? Like, this is a spell slot, 4th level spell slot is a spell slot that you can use multiple times. And if the enemy fails, it's a wisdom saving throw, which I will say is one of the more common, higher, saves that monsters and enemies tend to have. But if they fail, you turn them into a beast that can range anywhere between a little field rat, a little field mouse, all the way up to a T-Rex, I guess, if for some reason you needed to turn them into a T-Rex. But the point is that you can do this, and if they fail, then they are that creature for as long as you maintain concentration. My party and I, we were playing a Rime of Frostbane game, and we discovered the blind ancient white dragon whose name totally escapes me, out there next to the Black Lady or whatever that ship is there out in the ice. It's been a few weeks since we've played, and I remember, we were going out there, we were fighting this dragon, and I realized that, hey guys, we have a bag of holding. Why don't we just turn this thing into like some small little creature, toss it into the bag, let it suffocate to death? To which then the DM spoke up and said, well, technically, once the creature drops to 0 hit points, then it would revert back to its original state, which an ancient white dragon is way too heavy to be in a bag of holding. To which then I reminded them that, well, then in that case, we would be sacrificing the bag of holding. But with the bag of holding, if a bag of holding rips, then everything in it is teleported to the astral sea. So in a way, we'd still be getting rid of this fucking dragon. It would cost us a bag of holding, but we could do it. And immediately the DM started to describe how this dragon started to get as far away from us as possible and started to use her breath weapon way more often, and then ran away. And I cannot say how many times I've used this spell. It is one of my go-tos. Anytime I play a sorcerer, when that sorcerer unlocks 4th level spell slots, you can bet your ass that this is one spell that I take every time. It is just so utility, and it can end a combat instantly if you have the opportunity to do so. So absolutely really broken. All right. Also really broken is another 4th level spell here, which is Dimension Door. I don't think many people consider Dimension Door to be that broken, but hear me out here. So Dimension Door, you teleport yourself from your current location to any spot within range, which, by the way, it has a range of like 500 feet. You arrive at exactly the spot desired. It can be a place you can see, you can visualize, or you can simply describe by stating distance and direction, such as, hey, I want to go 200 feet that way and 300 feet this way. You can bring along objects as long as their weight doesn't exceed what you can naturally carry, which means you can fucking Dimension Door, a wardrobe. If you can convince your DM that you can carry it, you can carry any object. You can also bring one willing creature that is a size smaller who is carrying gear up to its carrying capacity. Your size or smaller. The creature must be within 5 feet of you when you cast the spell. And if you would arrive in a place of an object or a creature, then you and any creature takes 4d6 force damage, and the spell fails to teleport you. That last sentence tends to usually get ignored, by the way. I don't think many DMs, I don't think that they see that last sentence, because I think if DMs did, I think we would see way less Dimension Doors. Because all I can say is that as soon as my players gain Dimension Door, I immediately have to rethink how do I build my dungeons. I have to immediately, and not so much like rebuild, as more of just like, okay, I know that I have a player who at any time can go, hey DM, I want to go 500 feet this way. So that means that there's no like, okay, I think that they're going to get this far into the dungeon, so I'm only going to prep maybe these few rooms. No, for all I know, that player could just go, yeah, guys, I have, I'm going to 500 feet this way, see what's over here, and then I will jump 500 feet, back if things get hairy. This, so for exploration, Dimension Door is fantastic. For a jail free card, for getting out of jail free card, for getting out of trouble. This is a fantastic spell, and this is so different than, like, say, teleport, because this is a 4th level spell. It's instantaneous. You can bring another creature with you. This is how come I argue that one of the best healers you can possibly make in this game is a Divine Soul Sorcerer. Because you gain the ability to simply go over to someone, and if for whatever reason they need healing, but you don't have the ability to sit there and heal them right now because, the danger is right around the corner, then you can go up, Dimension Door, yank them out of danger, and travel 500 feet. There's so, this is one of those, this is, to me, one of the greatest utility spells in 5th edition. It has gotten me out of so many situations. It has assisted us into so many situations. I once got into I once purposefully allowed myself to get swallowed whole by a dragon. And my teammates my party members were all worried and were like, oh my god, we have to save you. And I said, no, don't. I said, I already have a plan. I wanted to get swallowed. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah. So I told the DM that I had a bag of coins, of 10 coins in my hand. And as soon as I got swallowed, I want to dump the coins. And some of you may already know where this is going. On my next turn, I took bludgeoning damage, like 20 or 30 something bludgeoning damage. Well, what I did is I cast Animate Object on these 10 coins, and then made them into 10 fucking bullets that just went flying through and around the intestinal tract of this dragon. Which I believe, with 10 tiny objects, I think it was something like, 1d6 or 1d4 plus 2, and I asked the DM, I said, hey, these things literally can't miss. Like, they're literally inside the stomach. And so he said, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, I guess just roll damage. Like, I don't really know how, how they could miss, because it's not like they're a weapon. It's not like, they're swinging around little daggers. Like, they are flinging themselves like bullets, in and around the space. Like, how can they miss? And so I was racking up damage, and then the very next turn I took some bludgeoning damage, and then I just Dimension Doored out, and I kept those fucking things in his stomach, just every round, just doing damage. So for me, this is such utility. It gets you into so many places, out of so many places. It's good in combat, out of combat. I cannot imagine putting this in any other place than really fucking broken. Which then leads us to the last. Now, this is gonna surprise you. I may catch some flack. I'm sure that there's 1,000 other spells out there in D&D, obviously a joke because there's not 1,000 spells in D&D, but I'm sure that there's dozens of spells at least in D&D 5th edition that you would look at and go, how in the hell are you saying that Healing Word is the most broken spell in 5th edition? There's no fucking way. How can you say that when you just described all the things that Dimension Door does, that what about spells I didn't even mention? What about like the fly spell and all the problems it solves? What about Fireball? What about Wish? How can we say that any of these are not the most broken spells? How can a 1st level fucking bonus action spell be known as the most broken spell in 5th edition to me? To which I say, you have never DM'd a party in which 2 or more players had Healing Word. The fact that it is 1st level, the fact that it's a bonus action, the fact that it's range. All of these things together make it so that you can have multiple classes. Healing Word is very common. Bard can learn Healing Word. Clerics, no Healing Word. Druids, no Healing Word. I believe, I'm trying to think if any of the other spellcasters do. I think a paladin may, I don't know, maybe. I don't know if a paladin can learn. I think a paladin's reserved only to cure wounds, but they might. But here's why I say that this is the most broken class or the most broken spell here in D&D. No spell can make a DM change an entire rule set like this spell can. I have seen, in my opinion, I think one of the biggest pet peeves, one of the biggest bitching things that DMs of 5th edition complain about is the training wheels that seem to just be eternally on. The fact that if a player drops down to 0, it doesn't matter by how much, they're just at 0. Now, obviously, if they get walloped really big, such as going over their starting health, their max health, then they insta-die. But let's be honest, how common really is that, right? Like, that's not very common. So instead what ends up happening is that you, the DM, when we build combat encounters, I don't think any DM builds a combat encounter, besides maybe like the final boss encounters. No DM builds encounters with the total idea, with the point being that they are here to try to kill a player. In all honesty, like, even someone like me who will openly tell their players, and openly and honestly tell you, the listener here, that I don't fudge my rolls. I let my dice fall where they fall. If I think that, wolves would kill you and that, would knock you down to 0 and then would drag your body back to the, back to the den, which would probably cause some piercing damage along the way, thereby, giving you failed saving throws, then, like, that's what's going to happen. But even I don't have the purest intention of trying to kill players in every combat encounter. I had to when this spell started to get used, because it never ended. You would knock a player down. This ruins action economy. You would knock a player down. You as a DM, you would knock a player down to 0, unconscious. Okay? Immediately your mindset is, okay, one player down, now I'm going to move on to the next one, right? Like, I'm going to leave that player there. I'm going to let him make some death saving throws. If they fail 3 death saving throws, then, like, they fail 3 death saving throws. Like, that sucks, but, like, hey, the power of the dice were not with you. But when this spell was introduced, as a mass spell that so many classes could take, then all of a sudden you can't leave bodies around. And this is one of my biggest problems with 5th edition. I think this was one of the biggest power creeps of 5th edition, was when they gave Druid the ability to use a bonus action, kind of their own version of Healing Word. I forget what circle that is. The Circle of the Dream Druid, I believe, where they have that well of D4s that they can use, or the Celestial Warlock. Don't get me wrong, you will never catch me saying that the Celestial Warlock is broken, but the fact that if someone played one, the fact that they would have the ability to just bonus action heal somebody, like, this is probably one of the biggest power creeps, because it forced us DMs to change what our aim was in combat scenarios. Whereas in past editions, I think that it was very, very common for DMs to just go, okay, I'm going to try to knock you unconscious, and if I do, I'm going to move on to somebody else. But we can't do that anymore. We as DMs, all over, universally, we've had to change what our aim is. Because no longer can I just knock you unconscious, because here's what's going to happen, right? Okay, is that if any enemy I have that has even the most basic intelligence is going to knock you down, turn around, attack one of your allies, get walloped from you from behind because someone used bonus action healing word from 60 feet away, and so you spent your turn getting up, moving, 15 feet, and then hitting my enemy. And so then that enemy on their turn is going to turn around and knock you back down to 0, but now that enemy is going to go, you keep getting up. So I can't leave you unconscious anymore. This one spell changed how we DMs have to deal with players going unconscious. Because at least with, like, say, Cure Wounds, right, is that Cure Wounds or Paladin's Lay on Hands is it forced you, the healers of the party, to come into danger to try and bring that player up. Whereas here, it's like you can be 60 feet out. You can be so far off the fucking battle map. And you can just keep pumping this dude full of heals. And since there's no negative, the player could be at 2 death saves. I could have knocked them for fucking 80 points of damage if they had more than 80 points of health. Which would be the equivalent, if we're going with the commoner rule, an average commoner has like, 2 to 4 hit points, 10 in all their base stats, AC of like 9 or 10, right? If that's the case, then like, if I hit you for 80 points of damage, then that's 8 times the amount of lethal force it would take to kill a commoner. And yet you mean to tell me that a first level bonus action spell from 60 feet away is enough to negate all of that blood? I'm turning you into mincemeat, and some fucking bard, halfway across the battle map just, tells you that you look good today, and now boop, you're back up with all the death saves gone, with, no issue, and you just spend your turn getting up half speed and going back to hitting me again. And so this one spell forced DMs to have to change how we deal with players going unconscious. I don't think there's ever been a spell. I don't think there is a spell that has changed more when it comes to how DMs had to deal with a mechanic in 5th edition like Healing Word has. And if your DM hasn't, if your DM is someone who like, I'll be honest, I have a homebrew. I have a home rule in my tables. Obviously not for new players, because I don't want to already increase the amount of stress on them. But once I have players that have been, that have played at least once with me before, I always tell them that Healing Word becomes a touch. It's still a bonus action. It's still a first level spell, and it's still a D4, but now it's a touch. You have to touch them in order to use Healing Word. And immediately, that one change immediately changed the whole dynamic of combats. Because my players were abusing this spell. If your DM has not done that, if your DM has not changed how they deal with Healing Word, I dare you, convince one of your buddies in that next campaign. One of you go Druid, one of you go Cleric. Alright? Or one of you go Bard, and one of you go Druid, or whatever combination. And just back and forth. Healing Word, Healing Word, Healing Word. Just back and forth. And I promise you, within a few combat scenarios, you're going to start to see enemies that don't let you heal. You're going to see enemies that go for kills every time they can. You're going to start seeing enemies that somehow throw, if you get attacked by this weapon, then you cannot be healed until the end of the enemy's next turn. Something like that. And because this spell changes how we DMs have to deal with a mechanic. And I don't think there's any spell that can claim that title. Which is why I give it the title of being the most hella fucking broken spell in D&D 5th edition. But hey, that's my opinion. It is worth less than 2 cents. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, and I will catch you next time.